Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome to another live stream on Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I'll be doing another video answering DNA test and genealogy questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Tried starting a little bit closer to the time this time. Usually I try to let everyone kind of get into the chat first. Wait, why is it telling me Wi-Fi? I'm hard connected in. Okay, there we go. Sorry, having a little glitch here. Hopefully shouldn't have too many problems. As always, let's do our hello with everyone coming in. And our Scandinavian representation came in real early. The Naval Disabled. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is having a fine night or morning from Stockholm, Sweden, which I guess Sweden, it's what? 1 a.m. there? It's midnight or 1 a.m., I'm guessing. And then we have Stig coming in from Oslo, Norway, and saying, now we're just waiting for someone from Copenhagen. We need that Denmark representation too. And then I guess if we have some Finnish representation, why not? Tasha Carl coming in from rainy Minnesota, which, funny enough, obviously Minnesota getting a lot of the Scandinavians. That's where they migrated in the U.S., so kind of all fits. Alexandra coming in from Koblenz, Germany. Wonderful to have you as always. Love for all. Hello. Vidalice Moy. I'm no Vidalicit at Moy. I don't know. I do genealogy the hard way. I climb trees. Okay, yeah. Hopefully not physically climbing trees while you're doing genealogy. That'd probably make it a little too difficult. Heidi Shelfont, hello. Thank you for joining us, Heidi. Daniel coming in on time. Hello from Bristol, UK. Sharon coming in from New York. Thunderstorms happening there. Okay. Jake asking, can we ask questions in chat? Or not Jake, Joke. Are you okay? Joke? I don't know. Yeah, so you can ask questions in chat. I guess this is a good point to say this for those who aren't familiar with my live streams. I'll be answering questions from chat. I used to do a lot of Reddit questions. I will keep Reddit questions in the background as something to use if there's not a lot of questions coming through chat. I can't guarantee that I will answer every question that comes in through chat. Part of it is sometimes chat goes fast, and especially if I'm doing a lot of talking and researching and stuff, I miss stuff. So one thing I always say is that I do guarantee if you do one of the paid questions or whatever, I will answer those. In part, I guarantee it because it actually pops up in a way where it's not going to get lost in the chat. But, you know, if you're not required to pay anything for me to answer a question, you know, if I just don't get to it or it seems like I miss it, just post it again. But yeah, so we'll have a lot of questions we've got to, and there's an interesting one on the Reddit that if we get to it, that'll be pretty good. It talks a little bit about precision recall. It's a question like that. All right, so Sheila coming in from Oklahoma City. Wonderful to have you, Sheila. Then it's 23:01. Okay, so that's 11:01. Yeah. I'm not sure we can say Scandinavia is early 11 p.m. Okay, yeah. I guess I was thinking it was an hour ahead of Amsterdam, which I know is an hour and ahead of UK, but I guess it's on the same time as Amsterdam. So Carmigale, hi from Nebraska, where the weather can't make up its mind. Yeah, everyone commenting on the weather today. It sounds like it's a thing all across the states, although it's pretty nice out here in North Carolina. A little humid, but not too bad. PZ, hello from East LA. Hello, PZ. We've Retta Winery from Kansas. Thank you for joining us, Retta. We have Destruction Cat from Croatia. Wonderful to have you. Some Balkan representation up in here. Love for all, North Carolina here. Wonderful to have you. Good to always have more North Carolina representation. 04 Lightning fan, hello from Florida. Hello. We have hello from Switzerland with C. Thank you for joining us, C. And then Catherine Michael, hello from UK. Off to Brussels this week to meet our new 91-year-old DNA match cousin, Lewis. Awesome. Hopefully that's a nice, fun trip. Then we have Gazillion PT, our Portuguese contingency, Boa Noite. Boa Noite. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it terribly. Markton, hello from Panama. Oh, hello. We've got someone from Central America. Yeah, because I mean, Panama's just north of South America, right? It's actually North America. Although I guess I always think of Central America, even though, yeah, I guess yeah. All right. Then we have Charlie, our wonderful mod admin. Charlie, thank you for joining. As always, good point to point out that if you're not familiar with the Discord, go over to my Discord channel. Lots of cool stuff going on over there. A lot of people interacting all the time, helping each other out. And I post little things here and there that kind of give hints at future videos and stuff I'm doing too. So kind of cool. Yeah. Then we have Nick Brokeman. Goedenavond iedereen. Goedenavond. Hoe gaat het? Hope you're doing well. Vanuit Groningen. So coming from Groningen, Netherlands. Onze Netherlands in the chat. Wait, are Netherlands in the chat? Yeah, I don't know. Close enough, right? I'm learning. Eclair. It's spite, man. Duran Childs or Chili's coming in from South Carolina. I'm guessing Childs. Hello, thank you for joining us. M Park, hello from Finland. So we've got Finland now. We still haven't gotten our Denmark representation yet, so still waiting on that. Happy midsummer. It is 0.03 here and the weather is nice and sun just went down. We'll be up soon again. Well, thank you for joining us. Finland is an hour ahead of Netherlands. Sweden is on Central European time. Okay, so just before that change, I guess, or just not just before it, I guess, just a little west. Nicole Ann, I was about to say Nikolai, I don't know why. Nicole Ann from Albuquerque, thank you for joining us. We have Karma Gal sent in a Y37 test for my dad. Now the wait begins. That's great to hear. I know you've been asking for a while about which route to go. Should you do the big Y, whatnot? So yeah, it'll be good to see what results you get from Y37. And depending on those, you may end up getting a more advanced test, if there's any matches that really stick out. Daniel, no A at the end. What am I missing? No A at the end. I think you were saying how I pronounced something, probably. Okay. Boa Note. Okay. Null Day, hello from Arizona, I'm guessing. It seems like you might have your caps locks on. I'm not sure. Marked in right. Okay, cool. Debs Crocart, yay, made it finally from Bournemouth, UK. Hopefully I pronounced your last name right. I've been saying that should be like one of my catchphrases. Hope I pronounced your name right. I should make merch like that. I've been planning to make merch that says hello everybody. And that's actually an idea Mr. Beat gave me a long time ago. Alan, greetings from Madison. Well, thank you for joining us. Wonderful to have you. I've been doing some research in not Madison, but Wisconsin, a lot of Rock County, dealing with a lot of the courts there. The courts, for whatever reason, don't know where criminal cases from the 19th century are located. They tell me it's in the archives. The archivists look, and they tell me they have nothing in there. They tell me it might be the historical societies. I don't know. It's kind of crazy up in Rock County with that. But I'll have that in a video coming out soon, the next YouTuber Family Tree series, which will, hint, criminal case. It's going to be interesting. Rob, hello from Kent, UK. Vanuit, Kent, really? Interesting. Another one of our Nederlanders. Wonderful to have you, Rob, as always. Daniel, Noit, not Noite. Noit. Beauregard, hey, greetings from Germany. Well, hello. Thank you for joining. And then Lynn from BC. All right. Well, wonderful to have everybody. Didn't have any questions in the chat except for the question about can you ask questions? So I'll give it just a second while I do a couple of things just to kind of check I'm set up right. So if you have questions, post them in there. But if I don't see any coming in soon, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and hop on this question from Reddit. Let's go get this here. Yeah, there we go. So there we go. All right. Okay, so let's see. Alexandra, are you going to try the new shared matches of matches in Ancestry DNA? Not only have I tried it, the fact that they have opened up the shared matches where you can see what your shared match is matching to the other match, I've already been able to solve 2 NPEs that I've been waiting years to try to figure out. And we knew that we had people in Ancestry that, it was a matter of how much are you matching them. And yeah, so I've already tried it out. I've already had success with it. Big steps. And then there's a couple of other things that I'm starting to dive into. So it is really a huge step up for Ancestry. So for those who aren't familiar, I'm going to see if I can pull up something. Ancestry recently just rolled out their advanced shared match view. See if I can anytime. Let's do this past week. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So this is behind a paid a paywall. So even if you have a membership with Ancestry, like I have the all access membership with Ancestry and had it for years and years, obviously. It doesn't matter if you have that or the US one or whatever, you still have to pay for what's known as Pro Tools, which is $10 a month, which isn't terrible, but I mean, another $120 a year on top of, all of the memberships are at least a couple of hundred. For the one that I do, I forgot exactly how much, but it's in the 300. So, almost close to $1,000 a year to be able to access all this stuff. But with the Pro Tools stuff, it is very, very useful. So I'm going to pull up this blog, share screen. Here we go. Let's make sure we got the nice looking one. No, we don't need to see my punum so big. All right, okay. Let's adjust this a little bit. Okay. Yeah, just save that. There we go. I don't know why it's being so annoying right now. Update. Okay, there we go. Okay, make it as large as possible. So they just released this, and basically what you're seeing here, this is the new way it looks. I'm not going to show mine because obviously privacy issues. Let's make this even bigger. Doesn't really make that much bigger. Let's see if there we go. That's a nice view. So here we have the person's DNA. This is you, the DNA. Here's your match. And then here's the shared matches. So it tells you how much are you matching them and how much is your shared match matching them. And this is a massively important step in determining a lot of things for genealogy, especially when doing triangulation. And it's something that has for a long time only been available through MyHeritage and 23andMe. Family Tree DNA does not have a tool where you can see how much your shared matches are matching. So just to clarify for those who may not be familiar, this 62 cm or 2,879 cm. CM stands for centimorgan. That's a measurement of DNA in a sense. So the amount of DNA is correlated to how much you're related to them, what type of relationship distance you're going to be looking at. And so it's very important to figure out questions, and especially for people that are coming from endogamous populations, so populations where for many generations, often hundreds if not thousands of years, people have only been marrying and have children with largely only other people within that same population group. And that makes it so descendants of that population group share more DNA on average than others because they're related in all of these various ways. And so that makes it really, really important when it comes to reviewing your shared matches, because when you look at a shared match with someone in an endogamous population, pretty much everybody else is already going to be a shared match, because almost everyone within an endogamous population finds a large majority of everyone else as a DNA match, even if they're just a lot of small 7 centimorgan segments that are just one segment long. So it makes it really important. I'm not going to get too in depth into how to do that. I'm guessing this blog article kind of gives you a really good idea of how to do that stuff, pinpointing relationships and whatnot. Let's open this one in. Yeah, so like this is giving a really big view of, you know, all of these different people, and they're all related. And this also is really important in terms of clustering. So figuring out how clusters are related, and a lot of advanced genealogy. So yeah, so yeah, there we go. All right. Let's see. Beauregard, I have a question. All right. Alan, same here. Solved 2 issues today already. That's awesome to hear. Good to hear, Alan. All right, here's Beauregard's question. My maternal grandmother tested with Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, and Family Tree DNA. She has 0.6% Ashkenazi DNA, but only on 23andMe, and also has 100% Ashkenazi matches. In FTDNA, she only has under 0.1% Sephardic. Could this be true, or could it just be noise, as at Ancestry, MyHeritage, she does not have Ashkenazi DNA at all? So being that we're talking about 0.6% and 0.1%, I think we're looking at a very low confidence that these are truly coming from a Jewish ancestry. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's completely ruled out. The fact that that 2 sites are picking up on Jewish DNA versus 2 sites that aren't picking up on any, that doesn't necessarily tell you that it's not true. It just brings your confidence down a bit. But understanding that each of these tests, while they're testing largely the same amount or same spots of DNA across your genome, each one is testing some unique spots in your genome. And it may be those unique spots that they're testing that they're finding this small segment of Jewish DNA. So if the other site's not testing it, well, they're just not going to see it. Plus, considering the issues of reading the DNA. So the fact that you're getting the 100% Ashkenazi matches, now that's bringing that confidence a bit up. So that's kind of the way that I look at all of this, is when we look at each fact, it's just bringing that confidence up or down. It's just, you know, how likely do we think it's going to be based on what we're seeing? So we've got some things bringing it down, some things bringing it up. Now, when it comes to these 100% Ashkenazi matches, there's 2 ways to look at the possibility going on here. One, that this Jewish representation in the admixture is true, and that's how you're connected to these Ashkenazi matches. Or the other thing being that even if they're not getting any non-Ashkenazi readings, they may have some sort of distant European non-Ashkenazi Jewish, or just not even saying Ashkenazi, but just non-Jewish. Because in reality, when it comes to trying to decipher between Ashkenazi Jewish and Sephardic Jewish and Mizrahi Jewish, it's very difficult. But then when you're especially talking about Western Sephardic Jews and then Ashkenazi Jews, Western Sephardic Jews were largely in Western Europe and Iberia, and you know, a lot of that, whereas the Eastern Sephardic Jews, North African Sephardic Jews went to North Africa, and Eastern meaning like the Ottoman Empire, so present day Greece and Turkey and Israel and areas of just Palestine, just all that area, you know, the British Mandate Palestine, the Ottoman Empire. Just if you look at the maps of those, you can find Jewish communities, and that's part of what's known as the Eastern Sephardic area. But even so, considering all these various groups of Jews, it's still very difficult to decipher autosomally with these admixtures. So point being that when it says Ashkenazi or Sephardi in your readings, you don't always have to take it as, okay, it has to be Ashkenazi or it has to be Sephardi. Sometimes it's just them having difficulty reading which Jewish it is. So yeah, so so basically you're gonna have to research further to figure this out. My suggestion would be to get other relatives in the family to test. Now, being that this is a maternal grandmother's test, that's going to make it difficult because or preferably you want older generations. So you'd want your maternal grandmother's parents to test. I doubt that they're alive. If they are, see if you can get them to test. But if not, one option, the next best option is if your maternal grandmother has any living aunts or uncles. And the next best thing is any of her siblings or cousins from that side too. Basically, what you want to do at this point is you're trying to do more testing in the family to see, are others getting these same readings? Because if they are, that could be indicative that, okay, this is actually leaning towards being true. So it's bringing the confidence up. Then even more, depending on some of the sites that you're testing, like unfortunately you're at, without 23andMe, they don't give you the data to be able to do DNA painting, because that's where you could really go, is if you can figure out what segment of what chromosome is this being read from. And then if you can correlate that, okay, all of my cousins that are also getting these readings, they're also matching me on that spot, that gives you even more ammo. But that's getting into the really, really advanced stuff. So, at this point, it's really, unfortunately, just, it's up in the air. It's really up in the air, unfortunately. So hopefully that was kind of helpful, and maybe as you do more testing or start to look at stuff further, that could be helpful. Obviously, one thing I guess I didn't even mention is just doing the genealogy research. You say you have all of these 100% Ashkenazi matches. Well, if you can look at all of your matches that are 100% Ashkenazi, see if you can find how they're matching each other. Because let's say maybe you look at it and you find out that, oh, well, they're actually all coming from this one family. Maybe it's, maybe you have a couple of these 100% Ashkenazi matches that are second cousins to each other. So that means they share great grandparents, and that gives you specific great grandparents of theirs to start building out a family tree for and see, does anything line up with my family, location, names, etc. So, okay, hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, love for all. What are some resources I can use or do when I've reached a dead end looking for my mom's father's side? This one's kind of a broad question to answer when you don't know the steps you've already taken. So just some general steps. Number one, learning the in-depth history of the locations that you're looking at. So maybe that your mom's father's side came from a specific town or a specific region or something like that. Sometimes looking up the history of that region and what was going on can give you a glimpse into things that you didn't consider in your research. Maybe a big event happened in town and there were some records that were created from it. And by looking in those records, maybe you find something helpful. So that's one step. You say mom's father's side. So then I also have the question, is this an NPE where you don't even know who the mom's father is? That sort of thing. So then the question becomes, how much DNA testing have you done? Because maybe you've already done some DNA testing, but there are cousins you haven't tested that if you do, you can do more stuff with it. Another great example, let's say you've done a DNA test, you can't figure it out, and you have a couple of siblings who have not DNA tested. Well, there's an advanced type of DNA testing where you have 3 siblings test, and then when you compare their tests, you do what's known as visual phasing. And visual phasing is basically when you're comparing 3 siblings, how they're matching, you can see very clearly the recombination points, which will indicate which side of the family that chromosome's coming from. It takes a while to master. Even once you've mastered it, it's very difficult. But with visual phasing, what the end result is that you then have it segmented out in your DNA, which segments are coming from which grandparent. So if you're looking for your mom's father, once you've figured out, okay, well, this one must be my paternal side, this is my maternal side, then you figure out paternal mother or paternal grandmother or paternal grandfather. And then once you have it broken down that way, you look at all of your matches and you see what matches have segments lining up with the spots that I've identified as coming from my paternal or maternal grandfather, I guess is in your case. So visual phasing, let's see, actually what I'll pull up, I've pulled this up in the past, and basically what that is I've done this for myself and for a few cases, including if I can find it. Here we go. Is this a good one? Yeah. So one thing I should mention too with this is I say 3 siblings doing it, but it doesn't have to necessarily be just 3 siblings. You can have more than just siblings doing it. Let's see. I'm trying to find a good one. One that's really interesting. Okay, this is a good one. Okay. So this is what visual phasing looks like. So with visual phasing, now here I've tested myself, my sister, my aunt, and my grandmother. Now, one's a paternal, or my aunt is a paternal aunt, and the grandmother's a maternal grandmother. Now, depending on who you can test for this, it can, you can get it where some segments you can't figure out, others you can. But basically what you're doing is you do a 1-to-1 comparison in GEDmatch. And when you do 1-to-1 comparisons in GEDmatch, they give you a very good view of how you're matching in DNA, because when you're matching DNA, there's something to consider that a lot of people don't think about, and that's, are you matching on a half region or a full region? And what that really is talking about is, when you talk about DNA, we always hear, you have a pair of chromosomes, right? One from mom, one from dad. Well, what that's also saying is that every spot of your DNA, you're having a base that is one from mom and one from dad. So your base pairs. And so when you match people through DNA, if you're matching on a segment just through one of the bases, one of the segments of bases, but not the other, that's half identical. But if you're matching them on that spot for both bases, or not both base, but both bases, so the entire base pair, then you're matching the full region. And by utilizing what GEDmatch gives you in terms of the full identical region and the half identical region, as well as the break and stop points, that allows you to create these recombination points. So you can see when you look at the comparison, well, there's this line right here because there you see this break. So you see how it's yellow with that one small little green. Yellow means half identical. Green means full identical. So wherever it's green, that means that we're matching on both of the bases. Wherever it's yellow, we're matching one of the bases. Wherever it's red, we're matching none of the bases. And then below it, that's just kind of giving you a general idea of, are you matching on that segment or not? So like you can see in the areas where there's no segment, like that black, there's still a lot of stuff that there's a half identical region. And that's just common because there's a lot of shared DNA. But what they're doing with these comparisons and stuff, it has to do with the segment of DNA. So you can see in these segments, there's no red. I mean, there's a little bit on the ends, and sometimes maybe you'll get a little bit here and there. But with this, by using these recombination points and lining it up, you can then break these things down. So here, this is me. And so my one side on this is chromosome 7. So this is just one chromosome of mine. One side of that chromosome determined paternal, the other side maternal. So you can see here from this, I got this from my grandpa Simon. So this is my father's father, my paternal grandfather. So if I match people on DNA on this spot on chromosome 7, it tells me instantly it either has to be through my grandpa Simon, or it could be through my grandpa Mickey, because we see we're matching here as well. The only time you can really decipher which one it's coming from is, let's say that it's a segment that's crossing over this line right here. So I'm matching them on this side and on this side. Well, that means that that match is not through my paternal line, because if it was through my paternal line, it really doesn't happen that way. it's kind of an anomaly for it to happen that way. So that tells me, okay, that match is more than likely on my maternal side, and even more specifically, it's a match through my maternal grandfather. And so that's what the major use of visual phasing is. But as you can see, just from looking at this, it's very difficult. Now, one of the reasons why this was really easy for me to do is because I have my grandmother tested. So with my grandmother tested, if you're trying to decipher, well, what DNA did I get from which grandparent? When you have one grandparent tested, you can instantly tell, okay, this is what I got from that grandparent. So that made it really, really easy. But this is something that maybe could help. So, okay, yeah, I'll just leave it on there. So, all right, that was the question. Let me see how far. Okay, we've got a lot of questions going on. There we go. Thank you so much for this very detailed answer. I'll try out your tips. Glad that it was helpful. All right, Jose Lopez 94. If I'm not Irish, but I'm part Irish, I think it possibly traces back to Bray County, Wicklow, Ireland, and I say that since I'm of Mexican heritage through both sides of my family. Okay, this wasn't a question. I thought it was a question. I was like, wait a second, where's the question? Okay, cool. Wait. Wrong part. Yeah, I mean, I guess rereading it, because I was coming at it as a question in mind. I mean, rereading it, I wouldn't say that you should, don't accept that as fact. Think of it more as, okay, that's your hypothesis. Based on everything that you know, this is the hypothesis. But keep in mind, you could be wrong. I've proven hypotheses before. In fact, when I was talking before about this new thing that Ancestry rolled out, these new shared match advances, well, part of the NPEs that I ended up actually being able to finally solve, because of this, I was actually first able to disprove that my original hypothesis was wrong. So, for whatever reason that you think it's coming from Bray County because you have Mexican heritage through both sides, that could be true, but then you just never know if maybe you descend from some just random guy that came from County Cork and ended up in Mexico, and that's it, or you just never know. So yeah. This is cool. I found out that me and Beyonce shared second great grandparents on her father's side of the family. That's pretty cool. So second great grandparents, that means that you're third cousins. So that's actually pretty close, honestly. So yeah. All right, let's see. Got a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna kind of scroll through real quick and just see if I catch any. John Tyner, hello, good evening. Home from the hospital since last Tuesday. Good to hear that you are. Hope you're doing well. One of our wonderful wiki treers for those who aren't familiar with John. All right, let's see. If Y haplogroups A through F all descend from Africa and haplogroups G through T are exclusively out of Africa, is it possible that the out of Africa haplogroups are children of fallen angels DNA of the Asian and European? I don't think this is a question that's one for me to answer. I'm not, I use haplogroups for genealogical uses. When it comes to all of this stuff in terms of archaeologically or anthropologically or anything like that, that's out of my wheelhouse. I don't really get into that. I actually had somebody ask me in the Discord recently about that. Would I do a video on, how ancient DNA this and how ancient DNA that? That's not my wheelhouse. I'm about genealogy. I'm about family history. I talk about DNA tests. I utilize haplogroups. I talk about the concepts of ancient DNA with that, but I don't get into the nitty gritty. So that is very much away from what I can talk about. All right. C, do you know more about the Catalan Spanish Sephardic culture around Barcelona? I don't really. The Sephardic culture that I know best is the Western Sephardic culture. So Western Sephardic basically being the Jews who had gone from Spain after the Inquisition to Portugal. And then after Portugal enacted their Inquisition, most of these Jews had to convert to be Catholic, whereas in Spain, they'd been given 4 months to leave. Hence, they left for Portugal, not too far away. But then the Western Sephardic diaspora comes out of the Jews leaving after already having been secret Jews, conversos, or what they would call what they were called, even if they weren't being conversos, was new Christians. Sometimes people will say Marrano, which is the derogatory term that was used. But for Western Sephardic diaspora, after they leave Portugal, they go to places like Amsterdam, London, Hamburg, Bayonne, Bordeaux, Livorno, Antwerp, and lots of other places. So I know about that culture, but not so much on Barcelona, unfortunately. Sorry. Love for all my siblings and I have done DNA tests. So yeah, if your siblings and you have done it, you can do visual phasing. And even if it's just one sibling, if you have some other close relatives, especially grandparents, then that's, that helps. Or if you have the possibility to test them. Yeah. Does this all get blown out of the water if you're endogamous? I'm not sure what you were talking about. I'm guessing you were talking about the visual phasing part. If you're talking about the visual phasing part, no. Visual phasing really doesn't get blown out of the water because of endogamy. Now, if you are endogamous or if you're coming from an endogamous population and you're using or if you're using not, 3 siblings to figure out the visual phasing, but instead maybe, one sibling and an uncle, or, not using super, super close relatives necessarily, then maybe it'll make it a little bit more difficult. But really, endogamy, from my experience, you don't start to see issues from it with the DNA testing until you really start to get out to, like, your second cousins, third cousins, for like Jewish endogamy. If you're talking some more hardcore endogamy, like maybe French Canadian endogamy, honestly, I guess is kind of similar to Jewish endogamy, but more, let's say, like Creole or Cajun endogamy, which is much crazier than like Jewish endogamy or French Canadian endogamy. Then maybe first cousins, you can have issues with, start seeing a lot of issues there. And then for Pacific Islanders, maybe that's where you get into some serious issues with it there. But for the most part, especially if you're talking about, first cousins, grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, and things like that, I find that for endogamous populations, it falls fairly similarly in line with non-endogamous populations. Now, if you come from a family that has a very recent issue of pedigree collapse, that's a different story. So if your grandparents were first cousins, or your great grandparents were first cousins, or maybe your parents are second cousins, or just something like that, that will make visual phasing much more difficult. I have no experience trying to deal with that with visual phasing, so I don't know how it would affect it necessarily. I can kind of guess, but I won't, because I don't want people to take that as, oh, that's the fact. But when it comes to visual phasing, I might as well just bring the visual phasing thing up and leave it up while I'm talking about it. But when it comes to visual phasing in terms of the endogamy, not an issue. I come from an endogamous population, and you can see here that it was not an issue. And in fact, this was probably one of the more complicated chromosomes that I dealt with for myself. So, okay. Okay. All right, let's do this. They often say with ancestry admixtures, if everything comes from one ancestor, it's at the grandparent level, etc. How does this work for areas where everybody is a mix already, e.g., the Netherlands? So what I think you're talking about is the fact that when people talk about, okay, well, if you have this percentage of DNA, that would be representative of about this sort of ancestor if it's coming from one ancestor. So if you notice at the bottom, I just put up the percentages that are the typical. And this is kind of more of a conceptual thing, and just the concept of thinking that, okay, it could be coming from more than one ancestor, but if it's coming from just one, this is what we're looking at. In reality, what it comes down to is if you want to kind of get an idea of what you're expecting, then at least in terms of the admixture, then you just need to break down what is the percentage of your family tree. So for you, if, let's say one parent is Dutch, then you're just going to expect 50%. If, you have, let's say, great grandparents on your mom's side that's Dutch and a grandparent on your dad's side that's Dutch, well, 25% from the dad's side, 12.5% from the mom's side, so about 37.5% or so. And basically, that's just all that you do is just what's the percentage of Dutch ancestors that you would expect. So that's kind of what I don't know if that's exactly the question you're getting at, but hopefully that's helpful. I'll try to keep an eye out if you have a follow-up with that. I know I kind of scrolled by a lot of comments and stuff just a second ago, but yeah, okay. Okay, let's continue. Oh, whoops. Oops, my question was skipped. I do see. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the $1.99. I'm going to have to find it. Part of the thing with the money thing, I should say for anybody else, part of why I do that is because when you pay for it, or when you do like one of the super stickers or super chats, it actually like keeps it at a specific spot. So I'm going to scroll back and see if I can find yours. Okay, here we go. Heidi, my maternal haplogroup is N1A1. My direct maternal line came from Wales. I've seen Welsh people doing DNA tests that have my haplogroup. Do you know how or when it entered the Welsh population? Now, unfortunately, that's something that I'm not super familiar with. When it comes to haplogroups, I know a little bit about some of the ones that I research into my family lines, but this kind of goes into what I was saying before about when it comes to like ancient populations and population flow, stuff like that. I don't really study that stuff in depth. I know it generally to help with the genealogical side of things. But a question like this would be really kind of looking more at what's available for that. So since you did pay to have me answer this question, I'll pull up some stuff that, like, if I were trying to figure that out, what I would do. I mean, the first thing I do is just Google it. Which, I imagine you may have done that before. And you can see sometimes if there's some papers and stuff on it. Another thing you can do is I guess you have to go to the Scholar, but there's a website, Scholar Google, is that it? Scholar Google. That's not what I want. Yeah, scholar.google. Yeah, so you can just, search N1A1. Now that's all the scientific stuff though. But one thing that I like to do, I like to pull up YFull personally, just because I'm familiar with YFull, because sometimes that can kind of give you an idea. So with N1A1, you can see that it's a very far back haplogroup. And let me see, where did you get your maternal haplogroup? Because if it's N1A1, I'm guessing it's probably 23andMe. So one suggestion I would have, if you're especially looking to really get in depth with your haplogroup, is to do a full region mitochondrial DNA test through family tree DNA. Or if you want, you can do a whole genome sequence test, which then you're testing all of your autosomal DNA as well. But that's only if you would really also want to have the medical side of stuff too. But otherwise, doing that mitochondrial DNA test through family tree DNA could be helpful. But basically, you just look at and see, where, or what I would do here is I would look and see, okay, where do I start seeing a whole lot of Welsh? And then that can kind of give you an idea. Now you can see here that this breaks down a lot more, and that's why if you do further testing, you'll get a better idea of your haplogroup, the groups that are below, because see N1A1, that's a 20,000 year before present, more than 20,000 years before present, and then we go to N1A1A. Oh, I feel like I'm saying that wrong. And then we scroll down and we can see, okay, look, we're getting a whole lot of Eastern Africa, North Africa, getting into Central Asia and West Asia. So, now we're seeing it getting into Europe over here. So, that could be indicative that, okay, somewhere around here, this guy, whatever these descend from, ends up in Europe, because all of a sudden now we're going from, well, I guess Albania, yeah, and then I guess the Europe is probably further back. So yeah, Europe right here. So we see all of this. We see a little bit of Italian, but that makes sense with the Mediterranean connection. And then, so taking a look here, so it's basically right around here, this N1A1A1A or whatever, 10,900 years before present or so. That's when we start to see all of a sudden all of these European largely descendants. And then we can even see, like, okay, here we see all these Hungarians. That could be indicative of Hungarian, but now we're looking at 1,700 years before present. Now, this is not a scientific way to do anything like this at all. This is just kind of a general way to get a kind of general idea. Now, if you do the mitochondrial DNA testing on family tree DNA, and you can see the reports they give you, and they can, sometimes those reports give you some really, really good information. But you might need to test further to really get a good idea of where you are in this tree. So let's go to this subgroup, and yeah, I mean, we're getting a myriad of places, but you can kind of see certain areas that are, like here, we've got a whole bunch of people in South Africa, and they're coming from this one. Now, they're all probably coming from some ancestor within the past, 500, 600 years that was in South Africa for whatever reason. But you can kind of get an idea. I mean, the other possibility too, they could all be siblings that all tested together or something. Now, there are ways that I think you can kind of look. Maybe you can't. I don't know. All right. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that was a little bit helpful to your to your question. At least in terms of what you can do to try to figure it out. Now, maybe you can look up like N1A1 Welsh, and maybe there is a paper talking about how that connection goes. I like to the one thing. One of the few places I do like to go to learn a bit more about ancient migration patterns and things is I follow geneticist Razib Khan. I also follow a few archaeologists and stuff, mostly YouTube archaeologists and stuff. But I a few others where, I read some of their stuff, but with Razib Khan, I kind of follow his Substack. I follow some of his blogs. I've been reading his stuff for a while. I actually interviewed him once for a video that I ended up never putting out because there were some issues I kind of had with it. So, as an example, here's one of his one of his articles, and you can kind of see how it talks about all sorts of stuff, very in depth. For years, he spent a lot of time actually consulting and working with the labs in terms of creating how these databases should work and admixtures and stuff like that. And he knows a whole lot about this stuff, a whole lot. So that's kind of one of the few places that I do go to. So you might be able to find an article by someone like him. I don't know if he's done one himself, but someone like him talking about this mitochondrial haplogroup and its migration patterns into Wales. So hopefully that was helpful. But thank you very, very much for donating $1.99. I appreciate that. And just to reiterate at this point for everyone watching, I will answer questions that I see in chat. I can't guarantee I will answer every question in chat, but I do guarantee I will answer every question that has the super chat paid for thing to it. I do suggest if you do that, there's an option where when you pay for whatever, you can have a message in there, put your question in the message, because that's part of why I asked for that, is because then it like keeps it in one spot where I can go and watch it very, very easily. So, okay, but thank you again, Heidi. Okay, so joke. My family tree 100% Dutch back to early 18th century, but I get 30% Britain, 20% Scandinavian. Not surprising. That the answer really is one that I have said so many times. A lot of my users, or a lot of the people watching that are used to me watching, probably answered this pretty quickly themselves. Just in the fact that Northwestern Europeans have a lot of correlation between each other. It's very hard to decipher things very specifically. And so, you know, it makes sense that someone who's Dutch, you're going to get some Scandinavian or Great Britain. Whether that actually shows actual Great Britain ancestry or Scandinavian, see, that's the problem, is the confidence extremely low, even though it's high percentages, because of the correlations between the populations. So maybe you do have, you know, I doubt you'd have a grandparent that's from Britain, especially, you know, 100% back to the 18th century, but you know, it's just, it could be that for whatever reason, there's a lot of Dutch DNA that they think is from Great Britain. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of even hard to call it Dutch DNA and all that, because one thing to consider is the complexity of trying to define all of this DNA through population flows that don't adhere to country lines super greatly. Sometimes they do, especially if a country is geographically, you know, the lines are based geographically, but largely they don't follow country lines. So it's very difficult to decipher. So that's really what it is. Okay. I see. Thank you, Mantachute. I'm guessing you have a question, because I do see some stuff right before that from you. So we'll go ahead and answer that. But thank you very much. So my maternal grandfather, NPE, is from a small Greek island, so endogamy is likely. Makes sense for those who don't know. One of the big things that leads to endogamy is geographic location, and island populations get hit the worst, because think about it. Island populations, it's much harder to leave or go back and forth or whatever. So you have much fewer people coming into the population group, and less people going out of it, I guess, too. Okay, so still working on which of three brothers he is. Another second cousin match is working on the same NPE. Banyan DNA gives 96% odds our grandfather is the same person, but fathered my mother and his grandfather 23 years apart. The only other possibility is two brothers fathered them. Is it worth investigating this 5% chance? How would I ever prove this? So, I mean, the way that you would have to prove it is you would need to get a descendant of one of the brothers, or even more preferably descendants of both brothers, or I guess all three brothers, to do DNA testing. So with the second cousin match working on the same NPE, that gives you a lot of ammo. Wait, second cousin match working on the same, like second cousin match, because if it's your maternal grandfather, second cousin doesn't make sense. So you're saying a second cousin where they have an NPE that they also think is coming from one of these three brothers. I think that's what you're saying. So assuming that's what you're saying, odds are grandfather is the same person. Oh, you're identifying. So your mom's father, and then this guy's matching as a second cousin. You think that your mom's father is his, I guess, grandfather. So basically, your mom and this person's parents would be half siblings, and thus you would be half first cousins, which would match up with being second cousins. Half first cousins are very similar in relation to second cousins in how much DNA they share. So just to pull up, as usual, the wonderful Shared Centimorgan project, we can see here first cousins. Wait, that's not half first cousins. Here we go. So we have half first cousins. Now the average is 449 centimorgans, the mean value, I guess you could really say, not the average. And the standard deviation is 134 centimorgans or so. But you can see what that range is basically. So half first cousin, 156 to 979, 449. And then when we look at a second cousin, it's not quite exactly the same. I guess it's much more along the lines of first cousin once removed, but you can see that there's a lot of overlap. Basically, if you're matching someone who is within this range, especially, I mean, look at where the range is, where it's very few once you get over the 700 centimorgan mark, very, very few that are getting that. So most of the half first cousins are going to probably fall within a second cousin range. And the way these websites are designed, the guess they always give you is kind of the standard, like, easiest to digest guess. So they're not going to say, oh, half first cousin. They're going to say second cousin. But a lot of them, if you click on something, it'll tell you, oh, what's all the possibilities. But if you don't realize, or if you aren't familiar with the shared centimorgan project, this is what I always suggest. If you really want to look at what's the possibilities of what they could be, and if you're on 23andMe and you're getting the percentage, you can also do that. So, okay, so back to looking at this. So, okay, so maternal grandfather, this other cousin who you think that their grandfather is your grandfather, but fathered my mother. Oh, okay, so he's actually a half first cousin once removed, because his grandfather and your mother. So you think that your grandfather is his great grandfather. So half first cousin once removed. Well, that actually, look at that. Half first cousin once removed. That's exactly in line with a second cousin. I mean, it's pretty spot on. It's pretty spot on. Very, very similar. So yeah, so that doesn't really matter as much. Let's continue. Okay, the only other possibility is two brothers fathered them. So basically, you think that there's these three brothers. One of the brothers is the ancestor of both you and this second cousin. But there are three brothers total. So there is still a possibility you think that two brothers fathered them. And using Banyan DNA, it gave you a 96% reading that, based on everything you put in, yes, your grandfather and this person's great grandfather should be the same person, but there's still a 4 or 5% chance that it's not true. So, I mean, I would always say it's always worth going further into researching, because until you do that, you're always going to be stuck with this possibility. And the reason they give you these percentages is not to say, okay, this is the one, 96%, that's the one. They're just trying to say, we've got a 96% confidence that that's one, but there's still a 4% possibility. It's a possibility that this is, a 1 in 25 chance, I think. Is that what 4% is? 1 in 25 chance? Sounds about right. I don't know. 5%, 1 in 20 chance. I don't know. So basically, there's a chance that it could be this other thing. So it could be that there's two separate brothers. Now, this is actually interesting because the NPE that I recently solved, thanks to the new rollout of the Ancestry shared match stuff on Pro Tools, that was actually what I originally thought. Was that I thought, based on the amount of DNA that I was sharing with two separate branches, we knew they were coming from the same branch of the family. We didn't know which side, but we knew that it came from the same branch. But based on the DNA, it seemed like they were descending from different brothers. Through this shared match opening, we were able to disprove that and show actually they're coming from the same guy. So these two women who we were trying to figure out who their fathers were, originally we thought their fathers were brothers to each other. Then we realized, okay, no, it's actually they're half sisters. Part of the difficulty was, we were looking at a really far back NP. These women were both born in 1919 and 1920, so a little bit further back, a little bit harder to figure out. So this is kind of the opposite direction. And basically, the way to solve it is by getting a descendant of that family to test. And what I mean by descendant is you have these three brothers. you want to get a descendant of each brother to test to figure it out. So the best route would be to get one of each brother. Next best thing is to get one of two brothers, because if neither of those two brothers' descendants match in the way that they should, if that guy was the father or the grand, the whatever he is, then you can presume that it's the other one. But then there's still always that possibility of, well, maybe, there were these three brothers, but maybe there was a fourth brother that they didn't even know about. There's always that possibility when you're dealing with these cases. You have to consider it all. So, that's what you'd want to do. So building out the family tree of these three brothers, see, are there, children that you can find to test? And if not children, grandchildren, but specifically descendants of these brothers, because if you're a descendant of that brother as well, if you're both of you are descendants of that brother, you should be matching in a different way than if you were descending from one of the other brothers. So hopefully all of that made sense. Yeah, hopefully that did. But thank you again for the $2. And then I see Heidi followed up on what I was saying. So 23andMe, yeah, that's what I was expecting with your haplogroup. So just to reiterate before, highly suggest family tree DNA mitochondrial test. If you want to go that route. And if you want to help support the channel, it doesn't cost you anything extra. I think in the description below, I actually have an affiliate link where, you buy it through the affiliate link. I get a little affiliate fee. I forgot what they call it exactly, but yeah. So, all right. Let me see how many. Okay, it's not too far down. Let's scroll through and see what we've got. Now, this question, is there any evidence the maternal haplogroups migrated less than paternal ones? I don't know, but one thing I can tell you is that when it comes to mitochondrial DNA testing, which is the maternal haplogroups, versus Y chromosome DNA testing, which is the paternal haplogroups, the mitochondrial DNA is much harder to follow. And what this has to do with is the way that the DNA mutates. So the way that DNA mutates for the Y chromosome mutates at a different rate than mitochondrial DNA. And it's through the following of these specific mutations that we are able to create these haplogroups. And I don't know if maybe that was kind of what you were asking, but when I read that question, that's what popped into my mind. So not necessarily evidence of less migration, just a lot harder to follow the migration, because if I'm correct, and I could be wrong on this, because once again, I'm not an expert on the ancient DNA stuff. I'm an expert on the genealogical uses of this stuff. The mitochondrial DNA is mutating far less than Y chromosome DNA. So every time you see a mutation, there's basically a bigger gap of time. So it's a lot harder to assign things to it. But they still can. So yeah. Heidi, thanks. You're the best. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Kevin Jones, my great-great-grandfather was a former slave. It has been believed that the slave owner was his father. With a haplogroup that is BM181, is that possible? I'm a direct paternal descendant. Now, unfortunately, the haplogroup is not going to give you a very confident answer either way. Because basically what you'd be looking for is, if you have the specific name of that slave owner that you believe is your ancestor, basically the father of your great-great-grandfather, then what you would want to do is find out what's his paternal ancestry, and does that line up with the haplogroup you're getting, because that would be what you'd presumably get. So let's see, what is it? BM181. BM181. So looking at the family tree DNA Discover, good, I'm signed out. Want to make sure I'm not accidentally signed into a kit. So with the YDNA Discover BM181, we can see descendants are from these countries largely. So we have Saudi Arabia, United States, Angola, and then 43 other countries. And so, there's not a whole ton of, that you can glean off of this other than, okay, it seems, a lot from Saudi Arabia, good amount in the US, good amount in Angola. I'm not sure if we can see the others, the other countries they list. But basically, if that kind of matches up, then that can give you a hint. But the thing is that look at how far that goes back. 82,000 years. So it's really, really difficult to get a good idea just from that. And then let's consider, even if it does match up, that doesn't tell you that that is the ancestor. That just gives you a hint of, okay, yes, you may be on the right track because this is lining up. If it doesn't line up, you can't say, well, no, that's not going to be the ancestor, because unless you get one of his paternal descendants, that's for sure one of his paternal descendants or from the same paternal line as him, and get them to test, maybe you find out that, what seems to be his paternal ancestor, maybe we thought, it shows his great 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 grandfather came from England, but we can't trace any further from behind that. And then all of a sudden you do a DNA test and then it shows, oh, well, actually, the Y-DNA connects through, something very different, maybe like a haplogroup that's much more commonly found in Central Asia or East Asia or something like that. Then it's like, okay, well, I don't know, you just never know, because maybe hundreds and thousands of years ago, some Chinese guy went to the areas of UK, had children who then had children who had children, and for whatever reason his Y chromosome lived on in all of these children, and that's the Y lineage that you descend from. And that's the crazy thing about haplogroups, is you're literally talking about something that could have happened thousands upon thousands of years ago. Just one instance. Doesn't even need to be a big migration. Just one guy who went from this place to that place, had a bunch of kids, his haplogroup lived on, and then you descend from it. So that's kind of like, that's part of the interesting thing of deciphering this stuff, is that it's something that always has to be considered of, what that's going to be. And then obviously when you do the more advanced DNA testing, because, we have BM181, 82,000 years before Common Era, then we're talking about a long, long time ago. And all of these descendants are traveling all over the world. So my suggestion would be, if you really, really want to get deep into it, for one, BM181, I'm guessing you did a 23andMe test because it is such a high up haplogroup. It's not a much more recent one. So with something like that, I would suggest doing higher grade Y-DNA testing, because then you'll see what your Y-DNA matches are. And then you have more fuel than just the haplogroup, because if you know the name of the slave owner, and, let's say their surname is something unique, Kickawow, or even not something unique, Davis, you do the Y-DNA test on family tree DNA, and then all of a sudden you see all, or not even all, let's say a large majority of your matches have the Davis surname. Well, that's a much, much bigger hint that you're on the right track than just having that haplogroup, because now you have that specific surname lined up. Now, obviously, if it's a much more uncommon surname like that Kickawow that I don't even know if that's a surname. I might have just made that up, or maybe that's something in my subconscious. I don't know. That's an even stronger one. But even better, if you know this slave owner's name, you could build out their family tree and, for one, see are any Y-DNA matches, if you do that Y testing, descendants of him, because boom, you get that. That's proof. That is confident proof right there. Or at the very least, it's proof that your great-great-grandfather's father was from that family. Because the other thing to consider with the slave owner thing is that wasn't just the slave holder, the slave owner that was raping the slaves. It was family members. It was overseers. It was, a lot of people. And so that's something else to unfortunately have to consider when doing this sort of thing. But you get that to happen, and you're looking at, if it's, this would be your third great grandfather who is the slave owner. If this is true, then doing autosomal DNA you may be close enough in relation to these these white relatives of yours that would have descended from the slave family as well, or excuse me, not the slave family, but the slave holding family, then they may be matching you autosomally. So just through a regular test. So, yeah, so BM181, not enough ammo, even if it's matching up, but certainly a step possibly. First time made one of these lives. Well, glad that you're able to make it live. Thank you for joining. Then we have Clarissa Long. What history YouTubers do you watch? Geez, I mean, I watch a lot of different history YouTubers. I feel like I've got to pull up my YouTube to kind of even look. Oh, and of course, I'm logged into my professional React channel, so it's a little bit harder. Dime Store Adventures is one that I think a lot of people sleep on. He's a much smaller channel. I did a collaboration with him a few years back, and ever since then, I've been kind of addicted to his channel, really up the alley of genealogists, because what he does is he uses a lot of genealogy type techniques to tell stories of just random people. So instead of, finding these people through genealogy, he's finding these people in other ways. So like interesting graves in certain cemeteries, or really interesting landmarks, or just, different things like that. And then he looks at the history of it, and it's just, he does it in a really cool way. His videos are really, really good. Some other history tubers I watch, Mr. Beat, I watch a good bit of his videos. Useful Charts I watch a little bit here and there. Not quite as much as I used to, just because I think, a lot of his more recent content just hasn't been up my alley as much, like the whole religious stuff and all of that, doesn't hit me as much, but, every once in a while I do watch some of his stuff. Chris from Vlogging Through History. Every once in a while I watch History with Kaylee During, who's Dutch, by the way. I'm actually doing her family tree for upcoming YouTuber family tree series. What are some other ones? Gosh, I don't even know. All right, see if I can go to this without screwing up the stream somehow accidentally. Sam Aronow. I watch Sam every time Sam puts out a video. I watch it. I love his videos. The way he does them is amazing. And he's always telling history that I partially know, but there's so much of it that I didn't know, and that it ties so deeply into the larger history of everything. In fact, his most recent video one of his recent videos was going through questions from his users, or a survey, or I forgot exactly what it was, but it was questions from his Patreon users. And one of the questions was, what was one of the most surprising things he found in the process of doing his videos? And the thing he said, which I was like, that's how I feel watching all of his videos, is that he was surprised at how often these seemingly unique and not told stories tied in so much into the larger picture, and in a way that was so very seldom discussed. So that's some of them. I doubt a lot of those are surprises to a lot of people, because I mean, probably Dime Store Adventures most of all, because he's probably the least known. But I feel like I've collaborated with all the people that I've mentioned at this point. I'm trying to think of people that I don't collaborate with, history tubers that I watch, because I'm part of a lot of history tuber groups too. What are some ones that I've watched? I get War Room Operations. That's one I like to watch from time to time. I don't even know if they still do stuff. History Dose. Or is it, History Dose or Dose of History? I can never remember. Dose of History. Yeah, History Dose. It is History Dose. I always say History Dose, and I'm like, wait, that doesn't sound right. But yeah, he's a really good channel. His stuff is just so cool. I remember the first time I was watching it, I was like, this guy's got the perfect voice for this kind of a content. And then this is I'm on my reaction channel right now, so I do watch a lot of this stuff. But I don't watch as much. But you can kind of see, of course, everybody's got to be subscribed to Mr. Beast on all of their channels, right? But then Mr. Beat, Todd Berriage, great music stuff. For anyone who's not familiar with it, I love watching this stuff. And then Genealogy with Dana Leeds. Good shout out for Dana there. Useful charts, how we got here, Genealogy. I don't watch a ton of Brian's stuff, but every now and again he has videos that I'll watch, especially if it's something that like kind of involves something I've researched or something like that. Here's Dime Store Adventures that I talked about before, which, wow, I didn't realize he'd overtaken me in subscribers. He was actually much lower subscriber count than I was on my main channel for a long time. And then my gaming channel, a walking channel, and then vlogging through history. And yeah, okay. So let's go back to that. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I'm just getting to the part where I must have been talking about talking about your question. So hopefully, I just want to see. Yeah, his uncle and my mother share 888 centimorgans. She could be his half on if NPE is the same person. Yeah, it seems to match up. So yes, you got it. Yeah, that's okay. All right, yeah, I was just reading through a lot of Montecute's reactions. Carol, what does once removed mean when you read your matches? I don't understand that. If you get a match that is a fifth cousin or fourth cousin and is at a medium confidence level, is that true? So with the medium confidence level, I think that's what MyHeritage does. I don't know if any of the other ones actually, I think maybe Ancestry does say that too, medium confidence level and low confidence. Basically, it's kind of the same thing that I talk about when I talk about the admixture results, where you get this percentage, we have a low confidence that that's true. And then certain things may bring up that confidence. So basically what they're saying is with some of these fifth or fourth cousins, if they're giving it a medium confidence level, basically what they're just saying is that, based on what we're seeing, there is a slight chance that this could be what's known as a false positive match. So basically just means that it looks like you're sharing DNA when you shouldn't necessarily be sharing it. Now, the technical term for that is, oh gosh, why am I blanking on this? It's IBC, identical by chance. So there's three terms that people often hear when talking about this. There's identical by descent, IBD, which I know a lot of people laugh at that because irritable bowel, or no, not IBD, but then there's IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, really identical by state, and then there's IBC, which is identical by chance. So identical by state just means that the DNA is identical because of the state of the DNA. Basically, we read the DNA this way, we compared it, and because of the state of the DNA, they matched. So that's kind of the broad overview. For a long time, a lot of people use that as the terminology to kind of indicate that it might be a false positive segment. Since then, a lot of people have refined the way they define it. And so IBS, identical by state, is kind of the umbrella term. And under that, you then have identical by descent and identical by chance. Identical by descent means that you and this person have DNA that's identical because you descend from shared ancestry. Or shared ancestors is a much better way to put it than just ancestry. So you descend from shared ancestors. And the IBC, identical by chance, is saying that you have DNA that you share, or not necessarily share, but you match with this person. You both have DNA at that spot that seems to be the same because of chance. And there's a few varieties of that. There could be, first of all, an error in reading the DNA. When they do these tests, they're reading 700,000 plus spots of DNA that they call SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. And there's a 1% chance that, or there's a 1% margin of error. So if you're looking at 700,000 spots and there's a 1% margin of error, that means you have at least or about 7,000 different spots of DNA, 7,000 markers that were incorrectly read on average. So that's one issue. Then the issue of phasing, which I'm not going to get too into at this point. Basically, that's the idea of you have DNA inherited from mom, DNA inherited from dad, but they actually can't tell which you inherited from which. And so sometimes they might match segments up because they're accidentally mixing up DNA from mom and mixing up DNA from dad. Now it looks like a whole different thing. And someone has a match to that sort of a weird mix up. And then you get an error from that. So lots of possible errors as well. So that's kind of what they're really saying. Now, in terms of the once removed, this is just talking about how they're related to you generationally. So using this chart, here we have self, right? So you have yourself, then you have your parents. Your parent's sibling is your aunt or uncle, and that child of your aunt or uncle is a first cousin. Okay, so that first cousin, they are in the same generation as you. But then that first cousin has a child. Well, that child is a first cousin once removed because they are your first cousin's child. Now, where it gets really confusing is that it should be looked at in a sense of like, you call your aunts or uncles aunt or uncle, but they don't call you aunt or uncle. They call you niece or nephew. But for your first cousin once removed, who is your first cousin's child, well, they're still going to call you first cousin once removed, which means your first cousin is two things: your first cousin's child, but it's also your parents' first cousin. So you have your parents and then their parent, their aunt or uncle, and then that's their first cousin. So that's really where the confusion lies, I think, for a lot of people in the once removed, is because it can go up or down. Granted, I think also part of it is just because, it's not a commonly used term. So it can be very, like, wait, what? What do you mean? And especially like getting the two removes and all that. So when you see these, we say that it's about a fourth cousin or a fifth cousin match on Family Tree or Family Tree DNA or Ancestry or MyHeritage or whatever. They're just giving you the most basic version of that. So fourth, fifth cousin of medium confidence, I'm guessing that you're probably looking at someone that's like a 30 something centimorgan match. So let's go with 35 centimorgan match. Okay. So we've put in 35 centimorgans, and now we're getting all of the possibilities of distance of how these people could be related. Now, when they give you a match, do you think that they're going to list every single one of these? No, they're not. They're going to simplify it because that's what these DNA tests do. They want to make it as simple and easily digestible by the consumer. So they make it so that it is that way. But the problem is a lot of this stuff is much more complicated than that. And so that can be a little misleading for some people. So when you see it saying first cousin or second cousin or fourth to fifth cousin or just whatever, that's often, you'll notice most of the time, it'll call it a relationship estimate. It's just estimating it. And this is why. And as you get into smaller amounts of shared DNA, like 35 is pretty small, you get an even wider range. So, I mean, you're looking at, you can have someone with 35 centimorgan match that's as close as a first cousin twice removed, or as distant as a fifth cousin twice removed, or even more. I mean, look, we have eighth cousin, seventh cousin once removed. These are all falling in the range. And so that's really what that's part of why I think they might be saying medium confidence. I'd have to look at the site and kind of read it, each one, because when it comes to a lot of these sites and their medium confidence stuff and their relationship guesses and stuff, I might take a quick look at it, but it's not something that, I focus on a lot because I jump over the shared centimorgan project to put it in and get a much better idea. Now, with this, we also get this chart, which then breaks it down into kind of a little bit different of a way to view it. Another option is you can put things into what are the odds, especially if you have multiple people that you're matching. and putting it into what are the odds could give you a much better idea of where someone might be fitting. But yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. Okay, let's let me wow, yeah. a lot of stuff I missed. Let me see if I can even find where I was. Oh, Kevin Jones follow-up. How would I find out his paternal haplogroup? No one showed as a match. Basically just try to find one of the descendants and hope that you find one that's a patrilineal descendant. So, from the slave owner, research that family tree, build out the known descendants, see if you can find living descendants, and you want to focus on the ones who would be patrilineal, and then you just need to reach out to them. And that's going to be the hardest part, is actually reaching out and trying to get them to test. One thing to keep in mind, have it as a possibility that you're willing to pay for the test, because for some people that's going to be, what stops them is, I mean, I guess, but I don't want to pay for it. Just be, if you're not willing to pay for it, then you got a little bit harder of a way to go. Just makes it a little easier to say, I'll cover it. Don't worry about that. Daniel, do you know your haplogroups, Jarrett? Yes, I do. So I show my haplogroup all the time because I've done whole genome sequence testing. So I have a very, very great idea of where I am within the tree. So this is me right here. My paternal line traces to the town of Sokyryany in present-day Ukraine, part of what was known as the area of Bessarabia. And it's in present-day Chernivtsi Oblast, which is, you see that Chernivtskaya Oblast. So this is me. And so this match and I been trying to get a hold of them, never been able to. But we are JFT 101167, and our haplogroup formed about 850 years before present. We then have this other branch that's a brother branch to ours, which descends from this, which formed same about 850 years before present. But what you can see is, they say that because there's a lot of question. We don't know exactly when. The more testing, the more testers we get, the better an idea we get. But we can get an idea through it as well to the most recent common ancestor. So for everyone under this branch, JY219975, so all three of us, our most recent common ancestor probably lived about 850 years before present. Whereas for myself in this match, we're looking at about 200 years before present, meaning that the shared ancestor that myself in this match likely has sometime in the maybe late 1700s, early 1800s. Very much within the genealogical window, especially because from my paternal line, while, my most confident tracing back is to the 1830s, I do believe that I know the name of that father, and he had the same surname of Goldenberg. So hopefully, if this person has that same surname as me, maybe we can, decipher that, okay, we probably descend from the same line, or maybe we are able to actually match up an actual specific ancestor. But then it just goes back from there. And so you can kind of see under here, all of us, this is typical Ashkenazi Jewish people. Now, this person obviously just in Massachusetts, but we can see here we've got Lithuania, Poland. This person specifically says, family spoke Yiddish, so we know Jewish. And then here with YFOL, each one of these is just going up the tree. So, basically you can think of it as a family tree. These two are brother branches, and they split off from this branch. And this branch is a brother branch with these guys, and then they come from here. And this branch comes from JSK 746. And then you can see all of the branches that come off there. So there's this brother branch that then splits off over here. And then we just keep going back up to the point where now this is what 23andMe has been able to decipher it best for me, is they call it JM172. Sometimes you'll hear it called JM102 or J2 or J2M172. JM1. Yeah. it gets really complicated because different ways that they all define it and all that. But you can see with J, look at how much more there is to consider with that large haplogroup. So this is what 23andMe tells me. With the information from 23andMe, I can say, okay, yes, I am somewhere within all of this craziness. Look at all that. Somewhere with all that craziness. Whereas I go back here, look at how defined that is. And this is the reason why people will do the advanced family tree DNA testing. Now, you need to do big Y testing to be this granular in your what's called a subclade. So JFT 101167, this is my specific subclade. But even so, even if you don't do the big Y, you still get a much better idea often than just kind of this general, really distant haplogroup. Sometimes maybe somewhere within these areas or so. Not too far away. But if you do big Y or whole genome sequencing, that's when you can get this really granular look. And that's how you can really get a view into things greatly. So, yeah. Okay. Give me a second. I need to blow my nose. All right. Okay, Matt Potter. I know you don't like distant matches less than 40 centimorgans, but I'm trying to find more info on my dad's great grandfather. So basically, descendants of brothers and sisters of him. So third cousins and more distant. Any strategies? I mean, with third cousins, you're going to be in those lower amounts, but when you know that they're related and you have the proof through the paper trail, that's a lot stronger of a thing than when you find a match who you don't know how they're related. And when I say that I don't really like distant matches like less than 40 centimorgans, it's really just in terms of thinking of it that way. I know that there are matches that, you could have 20 centimorgan matches that may be extremely useful. It's just once you hit that 40 centimorgan mark and below, you start getting it gets really, really difficult. I mean, like I showed before, jumping to shared centimorgan project. I mean, we're at 35 here, do 40 now. That it's still very, very wide open sort of thing. So that's really it. So in terms of strategies, I think this is where it gets important to start doing triangulation and DNA painting, because when you start to line up the specific segments, that's where, even though you're dealing with lower amounts of total shared centimorgans, the shared segments and triangulating those is where you're taking a lower medium confidence match and really bringing up that confidence slider a lot, not just a little, but you triangulate a segment, or even better, you triangulate multiple segments with multiple different matches from that same family. That's really strong evidence. And I have been able to connect in, even from my endogamous Jewish ancestry, matches who are in these lower amounts. Granted, a lot of those matches were cousins of mine where, they had one parent who was Jewish, or sometimes even just one grandparent, or one, not fully Jewish. So the endogamy doesn't hit as hard. Because with endogamy, when you're looking at 40 centimorgan matches, it's even more difficult. But that's why I bring it up, to say that, the confidence is much lower, but it's kind of, it's very much like a 1% on an admixture. It's not that I'd rule it out or anything, but definitely lower confidence and much harder to work with. So, so my strategy, get into that advanced DNA painting and looking at triangulating those segments specifically. Okay. All right, I feel like I'm so much, so many, kind of jump a little bit here, because I'm noticing that some of this stuff I'm looking at is from like a half hour ago, and it's like I really need to not be that far back, I don't think. Okay. Shouldn't you lose misattributed matches when one or both parents test? You never seem to lose matches. They don't seem to use this to improve accuracy of your match list, especially distant matches. Now, 23andMe did have that. I don't know if Family Tree DNA does that, but what Family Tree DNA does is they split it into maternal matches, paternal matches, and then both. But yeah, I mean, that would be my thing that I would think is that every site, as soon as they have it where they know they can phase your DNA with one of your parents, they should do that instantly and readjust your match list, because otherwise they're just leaving you with, you're calling them misattributed matches. I like to call them false positive matches. But this is honestly, that's one of the strongest ways to be able to determine a false positive match is you do DNA test. Both of your parents do a DNA test, and that match doesn't match either of your parents. Even with all of the issues of testing all of that, that shouldn't cause enough of an issue that you wouldn't match a match that your children are matching if you're related to them too. Or yeah. So if you test and both of your parents test and then neither of those parents are matching those matches, that's a false positive. So yeah, I mean, I would think that that's what they should do, but I know for a fact that some of the sites, as you say, they don't do that once they have the phasing available. Okay. Yeah, once the range hit 0, I guess it could, in principle, the match could be infinitely distant. Obviously, statistically, the further away, the less likely you are to have any DNA in common. Yeah, basically. And you can kind of see too where I mean, third cousins, that's where you start to get into the range of like, okay, you may be related to them, but you don't share any DNA. And this does happen. And then once you get further out, then yeah, it's just, I forgot exactly what kind of a curve that's called, but where it's just infinitely just kind of going towards 0 as you get further and further out on the matches. But yeah, okay. So how do I check my haplogroup and will it be accurate? Well, I mean, there's a few ways to do the haplogroup. The simplest one is if you just do like 23andMe or something, they give you just a general haplogroup. The next more advanced option is doing a family tree DNA test where they first have the STR tests. Let's pull up family tree DNA. Let's pull up their Y. Oh wait, no. But more detail. All Y DNA tests. Okay. So with Y DNA testing through family tree DNA, they have 3 tests at this point. It used to be a lot more, but I guess now it's down to 3. They have a Y37, a Y111, and then a big Y700. And you can see the prices get much bigger. Now, Y37 is testing 37 STRs, short tandem repeats. And this is more advanced than what 23andMe is doing to determine your haplogroup, but it's going to give you a haplogroup just a little bit better than what you're going to get with 23andMe. The big thing that you get is that you start getting matches. Now, when you do Y111, it's called 111 because they're doing 111 STRs versus 37. So the more DNA you test, the better of an idea that you get with things. And it is going to give you refined matching, but it doesn't necessarily give you that much better of a haplogroup. Now, when you get up to the big Y700, that's when you get really, really into the nitty gritty. And that's when you can be put into what's known as the phylogenetic tree. So this that I showed before, this is Y-Full's phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetic tree being the family tree, in a sense, of an entire species or a tree of species or things like that. So this is the family tree of humanity. Root, Y chromosome, atom. Every single human being in the entire world, is, as far as we know, descends from Y chromosome atom. Now, it's possible that through more testing, they will find a lineage that traces further back. That was done not too long ago and traced things a little bit further back. But family tree DNA has their own. Here we go. There we go. Has their own phylogenetic tree. So they present it in a few ways. So they have what's called the big Y block tree. So that looks kind of like this. So you can see how it's similar to what we were looking at before. So here's the subclade JFT1. And then you can see that's a brother subclade to this JBY171903. And then JFT3 comes from that. And then they descend from these. Now, what you see in there, those are the SNPs. And those are the SNP names. And the names of the SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphism, that's how they're coming up with the name of the haplogroup. And so you can see it's kind of going up in generations, and then you get up to something very similar here at the top that you can see from my tree. These are just all the names of those SNPs. Now, the other thing that they give you too is they give you the view kind of like this one, this phylogenetic tree. They give you that view, but it's Y DNA, the Y version of it. And then they give you all this other stuff. So, time tree. This is an example. Let's see if we can, where'd it go? So it's a video playing right now. I just realized, so hands up. But so you can see like this is taking that phylogenetic tree and putting it against the timeline. So you can see how quickly it goes back in time. So they're using Joseph Smith is the option here. I'm gonna replay that. So you can see RM222, and then it goes, all the way back there, and then there's. So this is the big Y. So this is why you do big Y, because it gives you all this really, really in-depth stuff. So that gives you some of the most precise, I guess you could say, information. Hey, honey, we get it. We get it, honey. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. Okay. If you get mitochondrial DNA HV on 23andMe and some closer matches get HV0, do you think it maybe is the same haplogroup because of a glitch or no calls, or HV or HV0 common with Sephardim or other Jewish groups? I honestly wouldn't know. That's one that you're going to have to kind of look up. I mean, you'd have to look and see. For one, is HV0 a subclade of HV? I'm guessing it probably is based on the name of it, but well, actually, I don't know. I think a lot of times with the 0 afterwards, that usually means that it's like, oh, we didn't expect this group, so we'll create HV and then HV0, but I could be wrong on that. Just see if that's a subclade of the other one. If it isn't, then probably you might not be looking at it, but this is getting outside of my specialty, Yeah. Okay. So many comments. I'm kind of just jumping through a whole lot of stuff here. Okay. Bonnie Dragon Cat. How do you verify DNA match when there are no records that you know of for the person in question, yet you have DNA matches between you and multiple cousins that tie into this person? I mean, with that, it's a matter of just trying to find the paper trail. I mean, sometimes it might just not be there. If it's possible to do more DNA testing to get a better idea, sometimes maybe the DNA can confirm it for you. I mean, if you have multiple cousins that tie into this person, so how do you verify DNA match? So I guess maybe because I was thinking this at first more ancestrally, you're saying like there's a DNA match and you can't find a family tree for them or something like that, but you have multiple cousins who are also matching this match. So you have known cousins who are matching this match, so you know which side of your family, hopefully, that it's coming through. Because if it's all these cousins are from one side of the family, it's from that branch of the family. And then if they're, if they have no trees supplied, then there's a few techniques to be able to overcome that. First of all, looking at their username, depending on the site, whatever information it gives you. Some sites will give you like Family Tree DNA. They give you the email. So you could use the email, use the username. Maybe you can find them on Ancestry.com because there's a member search on Ancestry where you could search for members. You could Google it. You could also look on social media for people with that username. The other thing is utilizing stuff like Been Verified or White Pages or Spokio, and stuff like that, of just being able to build the tree. So I don't know if that's exactly the question you were asking, but hopefully that's helpful. Now, I'm not really going to be able to answer that question. I just wanted to put up on screen just to say, how to break down Anatolian in the DNA result. Grandpa looks half Caucasian. Now, actually, I guess I'm not quite sure. Are you asking to break down Anatolian in the DNA result like Grandpa thought he was Anatolian? Or are you saying you're getting Anatolian as a reading? Oh, it's because this is like the ancient stuff. Yeah, I think this is out of my wheelhouse. Sorry. I should say again, I should repeat again. And I know this gets confused a lot because a lot of people will tie in these thoughts of ancient populations and archaeology and stuff like that into genealogy, because genealogy is utilizing Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA and haplogroups, but I don't care about the ancient stuff. I really don't. Especially a lot of the stuff about people trying to define population groups and stuff. And, 20,000 years ago, this happened and this, and it's like, yeah, you can use this stuff to get a good idea of interpreting some of the DNA results and all that, but genealogically, it's really not that useful. So I don't really focus on that stuff. So, I always try to say that. I always kind of end up saying that a couple of times, I think, in different capacities, because this is a lot of common questions, because a lot of people kind of conflate like, oh, well, he's talking about Y-DNA and haplogroups and stuff, so maybe he knows about thousands of years ago stuff and all that. So like, yeah. All right, I'm going to stop talking about that. Let's get to a question I can actually answer. And actually, I just realized I'm about to be coming up here on 2 hours. So I think I'm going to end this in, because I was actually thinking I'd only go for like a little bit, but I've just been talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. So a lot of haplogroup questions on this one today. And really, when it comes to the haplogroup questions, it's a lot of the same answers of just, well, you got to look into it. I don't know every haplogroup. I only know the ones I research. Yeah, so like Torsten's question, haplogroup RL48, the same as, so that one would just be a matter of Googling it. The R1B1A2A1A1C2B, that is a old school way of reading the DNA. So all I do is just Google that. Yeah, it's not giving me a way of like copying and pasting that. But that's what I would suggest, just Googling it. And then you can see Wikipedia actually has a lot of stuff for that too, where if you go on Wikipedia and look up the haplogroups, it'll tell you what are the different names of the haplogroups. C, which DNA platform and test do you recommend when the parents are second or third cousins to go on for the DNA test results in genealogy? So your parents are either second or third cousin, I guess not necessarily yours, but you're talking about the person who wants to do the DNA test, their parents are second or third cousins. Now, if that's the case, I think the best option in terms of what's the best database that you can actually get the most out of, I think there's a few answers with that. Now, I think the most straightforward thing that most genealogists would suggest for most testing in this day and age is test on Ancestry DNA first, and then upload those results to Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage, and GEDmatch. That, for one, is the easiest route because you only do one test, and then you get into the most amount of databases and the best databases. The other option would be doing 23andMe for your test and then uploading otherwise, but I highly, 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 highly recommend Ancestry DNA way more than I do 23andMe, like way more than I do 23andMe. And I get the feeling a lot of genealogists do nowadays as well, because 23andMe has been getting very far away from being useful for genealogists. A lot of limitations on a lot of different things. and putting stuff behind paywalls that, yeah, yeah. Either way, with that said, out of all of the databases, once you've tested on Ancestry and then uploaded the others, I think GEDmatch and MyHeritage may end up being the most helpful because they have the most advanced tools that work towards trying to get out of the issues that come up from what you're talking about is known as pedigree collapse. So pedigree collapse is just when you have two relatives marrying each other and then having children together, and that means that those children, now whatever however those parents were related, whatever ancestors the parents shared, well, those children are now related or descended from those ancestors in at least two ways. And so that's what pedigree collapse is, and that causes even crazier issues than endogamy. You'll hear sometimes people say endogamy is pedigree collapse happening over and over and over. Pedigree collapse does play into endogamy, but it's more of like pedigree collapse that's very distant, that's happened many, many times throughout the years. But endogamy also involves a lot of double relations. So think of things like, let's say that, I had a brother and me and my brother meet these girls who are sisters. I marry one of the girls, my brother marries the other girl. Both couples have children. Those children are going to be cousins in two ways. They're going to be first cousins because me and my brother, and they're going to be first cousins because my wife and her sister. So that's kind of the thing. But with pedigree collapse, like what C is talking about, it's bigger issues with the DNA results because they're closer related, and the pedigree collapse, where the connection is much closer related. So when you're trying to decipher things, there's a lot more issues to figure out. So with MyHeritage, they have auto clustering. They have the advanced views where you can do chromosome browsing and DNA painting and things like that. Granted, you have to go outside of the site to do the actual DNA painting, but they give you the information to do that. And then they have the most advanced shared matching view out of all of those companies. Granted, 23andMe is starting to catch up with their recent release on Pro Tools. But then with GEDmatch, they have a ton of advanced tools, way more than MyHeritage. And that some of those tools may end up being extremely helpful for you. I'm not going to go into every single one because they have so many. But I would suggest checking out Family History Fanatics YouTube channel if you're not familiar with them, because they have a lot of videos all about GEDmatch, and some of them may be a little bit outdated, but I think a lot of the GEDmatch tools are pretty similar to what they used to be. Yeah. Torsten, I don't know why 23andMe has shortened versions of the same thing. It really just comes down to like these different sites just choose different ways to call it. For one, not all the sites have the same data that the others have. So like on YFull, that has people who have uploaded from whole genome sequencing and people who've uploaded from wide family tree DNA, but not every family tree DNA user is uploaded to YFull. So all the family tree DNA users that have not uploaded to YFull, none of that data is in YFull. And so certain things may be called different because of that. Although I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these sites now go by naming it by the SNP instead, because there's already kind of a standard way of calling SNPs, naming each specific SNP. And so if you just call each haplogroup by the terminal SNP is the the jargon that you'll often hear. I don't know if they say that on here. Terminal SNP. Let's see, terminal. No, they don't say it. But yeah, so that's really what it is that some sites go by the old version where it was like, okay, we have R1b, now we have a new branch, we'll call it R1b1. Oh, we have a different one, R1b2. Then they keep going, and then by the time they get down to it, they have that craziness of R1b1, A2, A1, A1, C2b. And you can understand why. Well, RL48 or RM269 sounds a lot better. Which they say RM269. Now, I guess the question here, yeah, the RL48 to the RM269, it's a matter of looking it up and seeing, is one a subclade to the other? And if it is, then whichever one's the subclade, you can kind of say, okay, that's probably mine. All right. Sorry. Let's jump ahead. Um, yeah, endogamy is pedigree collapse on steroids. Kind of, yeah. Kind of. Yeah, my pedigree is so collapsed. I'm almost a Targaryen. Yeah, that's good. When I was at Roots Tech and Leah Larkin was talking about Banyan DNA, which is the new company they came out with, that their system helps decipher how you should be matching people if you're dealing with issues of multiple relations or pedigree collapse. But it cannot help with endogamy. But what was great was the example that they used was using the Targaryen family tree. So, yeah. I think you were answering something from before. Torsten's Jed Match's site up now is down yesterday. I don't think I saw it down. Yeah, it's back up. Probably what you may have noticed was they did a big update in terms of the security and stuff. And so for a lot of people, or for everybody, if you haven't done it yet, if you have a JedMatch profile, I believe you have to go in. You can't log in using your old password. You have to reset your password. So everybody has to do it. I went and reset my password whenever it happened. So maybe that's what you're talking about. So yeah, I mean, it's up for me. Pedigree collapse can also happen very close to home. I'll give you an example. My mother and my father are half second cousins. My step grandfather is also my paternal first cousin. Interesting. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I think with that, I'm gonna go ahead and call it. We talked about a lot of stuff today. Just kind of clicking back through the tree. So, one thing to just mention. So notice here, Weifel, this is the phylogenetic tree for the mitochondrial DNA. So for mitochondrial DNA, the phylogenetic tree traces up to, they don't have it named here, what's known as mitochondrial Eve. Now that term gets thrown around a lot. There's a lot of people, a lot of times I hear people misusing it and say the Eve gene, and they use it as some sort of reasoning to say that that African women are the only women that have the Eve gene, and it makes it so that African women can give birth to any race in the world, or some crazy line along that thought. And it's basically just a misconstruing of the actual, concept of mitochondrial Eve, which, people hate using that term because the biblical connotations, and that's why people get this crazy thought. But really, just mitochondrial Eve is, if we traced up every single human being's mitochondrial line, your maternal line, your mom's mom, etc., the point where everybody meets together is mitochondrial Eve, meaning every single human on earth descends from this woman who lived way back. We all descend from her daughters through our maternal lines. Now, it doesn't mean she was the only person alive at that point who had a mitochondrial DNA or anything like that. It's just hers survived. Think about it. Maybe she had a few sisters who all had mutations, and not a single one of them had a child, and thus that dies out with that person. So this is the mitochondrial phylogenetic tree, and then over here, this is the Y phylogenetic tree. So the paternal, so father. So it's two separate ways of looking at ancient DNA and ancient population migration. So yeah, okay. So yeah, thank you everybody. Can a pedigree collapse happen when the grandparents somewhere are related cousins in a way? Yeah, I mean, pedigree collapse just means that two people are having children together, or two people having children together that are related. And technically, everybody in the world is related to each other. So technically, every time someone is having a child, that child is the descendant of pedigree collapse. It's just that pedigree collapse most times is thousands upon thousands of years back, or at least hundreds upon hundreds of years back. Whereas, with more recent pedigree collapse, that's when it causes a serious issue. But yeah, I mean, basically, it's just people being related and having kids to each other. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Glad that this was helpful. I don't think I've seen anyone comment from Twitch so far, so thank you for the one comment from Twitch. Ether Breather. Very cool. Wonderful to have you. We also all descend from any of her mitochondrial Eve fellow humans who have descendants today. Correct. Yes. Yes. Thanks for the stream. Oh, Weeping Scorpion. I missed my Faroe Island contingency. I didn't see you in here. Wonderful to have you. Well, thank you for joining on today. Thank you everybody else for joining. I see yeah, we well, lots of interaction today. I'm loving it. Oh, yeah. Thank you. And Anna Tommaso here. Thanks for today's stream. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Thanks. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was a wonderful stream today. I'll see you next week on the main channel. Otherwise, nothing else. Just have a wonderful weekend. And I'm Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger. I'm out. I'll see you.